So do we now have Tina, John and Patricia?
We do,
would
sir.
Wish to be known?
Yes, please. Yes. So if the three of you would like to come up, thank you.
No.
Please state your full name.
Christina McLaughlin.
Take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Please state your full name
John Patrick Conway.
and hold the book in your raised hand. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but
and
the
nothing
truth.
but the truth.
Please state your full name
Patricia Martina Kelly.
and take the book in your raised hand. Repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Now, John, you have a naturally quiet voice, so you may need to move your chair just a little bit closer to the microphone so that we can all hear what you have to say. Thank you.
So just before I start asking the witnesses questions, it's right that I point out that they were relatively late additions to the witness schedule. And as a result, the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust and some of the doctors who are mentioned in their witness statements have not had 21 days to respond to certain criticisms voiced in the statements. That's not the fault of the trust or the doctors. And so those listening to the evidence or reading the evidence should bear in mind that there may well be aspects of the evidence which would not be accepted by the trust or doctors, and responses in writing from the trust and the doctors are expected in due course.
And they should read nothing adverse into the fact that there has been no response as yet, because the simple fact is the trust hasn't had time as yet.
That's right, sir. So that no adverse inference should be drawn. But as a result, there may be matters that they would have otherwise wanted to draw to the inquiry's attention that I would not be able to explore with these witnesses. But these witnesses will be giving their recollection, setting out their views, and you, sir, will receive the trust's and doctors' evidence as part of the inquiry record in due course.
Yes.
So you're Tina, John and Patricia,
Yes.
your siblings,
Yes.
and you have other brothers and sisters, and can I just go through them in order of age to see if I've got it right? Eddie is the eldest.
Yes.
Then there's you, John,
Yeah.
Maria, you,
Yeah.
Patricia, Paula, Anne, Rosie, and you, Tina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the baby of your family was Seamus,
Yes.
known as Shay,
Yeah.
and I'll refer to him as Shay.
Yes. Please.
And you're here to talk primarily about what happened to Shay and to speak on his behalf.
Yes.
That's correct.
But you're also going to tell us a little about Eddie,
That's right.
who's given a statement to the inquiry but won't be giving oral evidence. So Shay was born, I think, in 1973.
Yeah.
And he had severe haemophilia A,
Yeah.
and he was under the care of either the Belfast Haemophilia Centre at the Royal Victoria Hospital or Belfast City Hospital for much of his life.
That's correct. Yeah.
But also at one of the local hospitals.
Galvin Hospital. That's our local hospital. Yeah.
And in terms of medical records, you have received, as I understand it, Shay's records from, or that would have been records at the Royal Victoria Hospital or the City Hospital.
Yes, they were all received. We did apply for Galvin's records just prior to the Royals, but I only realised the other day we haven't received those yet.
Now, can I ask, first of all, you, John, as the eldest of the siblings giving evidence today. Can you tell us how Shay's haemophilia affected him as a child and growing up?
Well, basically, Seamus was very much into soccer, but mother and father had us all warned that he wasn't to play any sort of contact sports. So he was kind of pushed down the road of being a snooker player, and he turned out quite good at it. In those days, my recollection of Seamus is he had a very poor quality of life, very little schooling. We're going back quite a while, so when Seamus got a bleed or a hemorrhage in those days there, probably the drugs available mightn't have been as good as they are today. So I do recall Seamus lying on the sofa at home in real pain.
He didn't, I think, the way you've put it, Tina, in your statement, he didn't have a normal childhood.
No.
As you've said, John, he wasn't able to attend school regularly. Your parents were devoted to him, and he was the baby of the family.
He was the baby, yeah.
And I think you've all said in your statements, one of you's described him as the golden child.
Yeah.
Correct.
And
He was.
ruined by your walls,
He
spoiled,
described
rotten
himself
by your
as the
walls.
golden
I just described it.
Now, you've been able to establish, I think, from your own knowledge of Shay growing up and indeed what's in his records, that he was given cryoprecipitate and then factor products.
That's right.
And in the mid-1980s, he moved on to receiving factor products through a home treatment programme, so it was administered at home. You don't have details of precisely what products or what batches he was given.
No, we could only guess at them. He did receive cryoprecipitate, cryobalin, or, he has received those, but when and how much, we don't know.
Now, in your statement, you've said that in about 1985, when Shay would have been 11, 12 years old, you understand that he was tested for HIV and found to be negative.
Yes.
Do you have any recollection, any of you, of that process going on at the time?
One of my other siblings does, yeah, very much so, but I don't remember that. I just remember him being tested for what was in the news and stuff at the time.
And you've seen from his records that he had a number of subsequent HIV tests, all negative, but over the years, you're not sure whether he would have understood and agreed that he would be tested on those regular bases.
I honestly don't even know if he was aware of the first test. I wasn't even aware that he had been tested until I seen his notes for the subsequent ones.
Now, at some point, Shay was diagnosed with hepatitis C, and your parents were informed of that diagnosis. And John, you've said that Shay was aware of it from a young age.
Yeah, well, vaguely remember, obviously a long time ago, but I remember he was made aware of it, and I remember my mother saying to me that it's important that this doesn't get out. She says, be careful with your own friends that you don't happen to let this drop, because he's really worried about it, and he just will never put his foot in the street again if it gets out. I do remember that.
And Patricia, can you recall what Shay's attitude to his infection, to the hepatitis C was?
I can indeed. Seamus had a broken femur and was in the Royal Victoria Hospital 4 years prior to him dying. And he came to stay with me, because at this stage then I was fighting to get him a ground floor accommodation to suit his needs. He made me quite clear that he wanted his own towels, that nobody else in the house was to use those towels, and that they were to be thrown out and destroyed after. He would have done his own factory, he always did. Seamus was an expert at it, but I was not, under no circumstances, allowed to handle needles or anything. They had to be on a yellow bucket, and that I had always baby wipes in the room so he could clean his hands and stuff. I was not allowed to touch anything whatsoever.
And one of you in your statements has talked about Shay having been embarrassed about the infection, the condition that he
When the girl from the housing executive did come to my home to visit Shay, his words to me was, "You better not tell her I have hepatitis C." And I said, "Sure, Seamus, this isn't your fault." He says, "I don't care. I don't want you to tell her." And I said, "Right, okay, I won't."
Do you know what information your parents were given or Shay was given about the nature of the condition and its prognosis or risks of infecting others?
To be fair, both of them were very private about it as well. They didn't speak about it. Like John says, everybody was warned at the time when Seamus had it that was old enough to know. It didn't go outside of the house. There was nobody to talk about it, and it wasn't talked about.
And Tina, you've said in your statement that their understanding, at least at an early stage, was that it was, if you're going to get a virus, you put it this way, the best you could get, that it was no big deal, and that it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, well, it was that was the way it was sold, if you like. So we didn't worry about it. We didn't think it was just another label that Seamus had. You know, we were so obviously engrossed with the haemophilia because that keeps a lot of people busy for, you know, pretty much all the time. So we didn't think anything of it. But just to point out that the shame that Seamus had from the hepatitis C initially arose from what I would be 100% sure came from the doctor saying to him, you know, best keep this to yourself. You don't really want anybody to know this. So what was said to him even as a child, and obviously my parents would have been there, has probably resulted in why they didn't want it to be said.
One of the criticisms, Tina, you've made in your witness statement in terms of the advice that was or wasn't given is you say he wasn't given advice about how best to manage the infection in terms of healthy lifestyle and healthy eating.
Yeah, absolutely. So much so that it was actually when he was diagnosed, and I don't want to jump forward, but it's important to point out that he wasn't aware. In fact, I wasn't aware. None of us were. We're not medically trained people, so you don't look into something unless it's necessary. He went into McLaughlin very sick just this time last year. And when he went in, he asked for the dietitian because I had brought leaflets in that were outside about keeping a healthy liver and what to do. And Seamus didn't eat healthily because he lived on his own. He wasn't a big fella. We called him the takeaway king. If he was going to eat anything, it would be fish and chips. And I mean, fatty foods aren't good for the liver anyway, and red meat and stuff. We've learnt a lot this last few days. But Seamus wouldn't have been aware of that, and he immediately asked for a dietitian in the hope of giving him a few extra months of life, which was quite sad.
In 1995, Shay started a course of interferon treatment, which involved him having to inject into the stomach. How did he cope with that? John, can you recall?
I just remember vaguely that it made him very ill, and he just couldn't cope with the treatment at all.
Mm.
And was he able to finish the course?
No.
No.
Now, if we come forward from the 1990s through into the early 2000s, and obviously you've explained how the haemophilia that Shay suffered from was very much at the forefront of your minds and his mind. Looking back now, can you see the extent to which the hepatitis C affected him?
Absolutely.
And how was that?
Well, I mean, and we're only realising in the last year, right up until Seamus was diagnosed, we never would have been aware of symptoms, things to look out for. He wouldn't have been aware of it. Seamus would have been frail looking. You know, well, at times through his life he would have put a bit of weight on and he would have looked a bit healthier and maybe his joints wouldn't have just been as impacted. But there was times that he was very frail, very depressed. I didn't realise until the last week of actually the London hearings that depression comes along with hepatitis C. So yes, there was lots of symptoms that, in hindsight now, fit. And
you've mentioned in your statements in 2004, Shay received a letter about the possible risk of VCJD. Do any of you recall whether that was something that impacted upon Shay?
I can't. No, you're okay.
To be honest with you, he would have had letters from you and he wouldn't tell you. And he would never have said, oh, I get appointments or I get this, or everything was had. He had everything.
He was terrified of HIV and AIDS. He was terrified of that. So I would say when this letter came in, it would have been pretty much kept to himself.
Now, Tina, in November 2008, you accompanied Shay to a liver ultrasound scan in Belfast.
I did.
And that was only a few weeks after your mother had died.
Yeah.
And she'd extracted a promise from you, I think.
Yes.
What was the
Well,
promise she extracted?
Every day of our lives before she even died, but certainly when she was very, very ill. She didn't know she was going to die, but she was very, very ill, and she must have had knew that things weren't great. And her express wishes that we would care for Seamus, keep an eye out on him, make sure he was okay. Didn't matter about the rest of his life, but as long as he was okay, which we would have done anyway, of course, because Seamus was, a high priority for us all. But we were fulfilling her wishes.
And so you accompanied him when he went to hospital for the scan?
Yeah.
Did you go in with him for the scan?
No, not to the scan, but I remember walking in, and I distinctly remember Dr. Benson met us when we went into I'm sure we went into the hematology part, and he actually says, thank you for bringing Seamus up, and took Seamus away then for the scan. So no, I wasn't on at the actual scan.
And you've described in your witness statement, Tina, a conversation you had with Shay when he came out of the scan.
Yeah.
What can you recall about that conversation?
It was a curious conversation, and I've always remembered it. We were coming down in the car afterwards, and he was a bit quiet, and he says to me, that's the strangest thing. And I says, what is it? And he says, do you remember we got the money? And I says, the money for because of the hepatitis. And he says, or the contaminated blood, as he knew it. And I says, that's right. And he says, this hepatitis thing must be more serious. And I says, and why makes you think that? He says, because, it can cause cirrhosis of liver. So I think maybe that was when he realised, this could be trouble. But I'm okay. And he was quite confident that he was okay, and maybe confident that it would never impact him. He says, because they give you more money whenever it comes to cirrhosis. He says, but I don't want that. He says, because you're a dead man.
And he called it dead man's money,
yeah.
And that's the stage 2 skip-in
Is what I believe it to be, yes.
Is what you think he was there referring to. So nothing further was said. You understood that Shay was okay at that stage?
He taught me that. I didn't know any of it, and that has always stuck with me.
Now, one of the main concerns you express in your statement, and of course conscious as I am that the Doctors and Trust haven't had a chance to respond to it, but one of your concerns is what you regard as a failure to undertake regular screening or scanning of Shay in the years after 2008. Is that right?
Well, that was the only scan I ever had until he was diagnosed.
Just going to ask to have up on screen. And in fact, it's in your statement, Tina. So perhaps I'll just read it out. You've referred to a letter at the end of your statement in a summary, a chronology at the end, from the 10th of September 1997 from Dr. McNulty, and it says this about Shay. Although his blood tests are rechecked every 3 months, the condition of his liver continues to give cause for concern and would need to be closely observed over the coming years. Is it your view that the condition of Seamus's liver was closely observed over the following years?
Absolutely. I believe that Seamus was very closely monitored. However, that wasn't shared with Seamus, and anything arising from that, any worries arising from that was never shared with Seamus or us, because he was terrified that, as I said, this stage of cirrhosis of the liver and leading on, because obviously cancer is a very real risk. So he was very concerned about that. So whenever he left that first scan in 2008, he was very confident that he was safe. We were confident that he was safe, and quite honestly, we never gave it any second thought. We thought if there was any issue, the doctors would send for him.
So you're critical of the fact there wasn't a scan over the following years after 2008. Do you understand there to have been some form of ongoing monitoring in terms of blood tests or liver function tests?
Yes, absolutely. At his hematology clinic, yeah.
But you don't know what, if anything, emerged from those tests or whether they were shared with Shay?
Nope.
No.
I did look through his notes, albeit it was very difficult to look through his notes when he's literally just passed a year coming this week. So it was too emotional to look through at some of the stuff. But just as a haemophiliac going to clinic, your bloods are checked, but we were aware that his liver function would have been one of those checks that would have been being looked at, as well as virus levels and stuff like that.
Now, in September 2014, and you've already referred to this, Patricia, Shay broke a bone, a femur bone.
Yeah,
And he spent about 3.5 weeks in hospital.
he didn't.
How did that impact upon him?
Well, the way Seamus was, because he was in Belfast, it would be taking you out of your way. So what you have to do is bring me up this and this and this and this for the next 3 days, go down in and put so much money on my TV, and then just leave me alone because, you know, when I'm in pain, I can't be bothered with anybody, and then I'll see you in 3 days' time again. And that was Seamus's attitude.
And Tina, you've observed in your statement that that Seamus wasn't the same again after that. In what way?
Hindsight, I know, is a wonderful thing, but a lot of his friends were sending messages to me, you know, via Facebook and whatever, to say that they were a wee bit concerned. He had a very, very close group of friends, as equally like family, and they were very concerned about changes going on with him and things, maybe wee comments he was making about sore tummy and different things that were going on with him. And of course I would have probed him, but as soon as you probed him, who were you talking to? You know, so you were caught out immediately. So I did try and encourage him to go and make sure he was okay, and he says, no, I feel okay, or, you know, equally, no, I just wasn't feeling myself, but I'm coming round now, that type of thing. So there was that. Sorry, I've lost me.
No.
Yeah, is that?
Yeah, that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then a time came in October 2017 when Shay did go and see his GP. What can you recall about that, John?
No, basically, I remember him landing at the house and telling me that he had cirrhosis of the liver and he had cancer in the liver, and that he says, I've got 3 to 6 months to live, and I've organised my funeral, but I need you to organise a few other things for me and take care of a few things. And he just sat down, he had his dinner and he left, and I just couldn't believe the conversation. It was so surreal.
So matter.
I was like, that just took place, you know. He just walked in and says, I'm dying in 6 months' time. And it was shock, like, you know, total shock.
And that was triggered by, he'd gone to the GP first of all because he was experiencing very bad stomach pains, and then he was referred to the hospital.
Well,
And you've said that was quick, immediately referred to the hospital.
Well, he went to the GP with tummy pains, as you said. There was nothing before that, and what she seen in him, she was horrified. So much so that she had sent him for a scan, which resulted being done on the Saturday. You know, I didn't even know you could get a scan on a Saturday, but anyway, he was sent up for the scan. And unfortunately, as the events rolled out, the scan had showed that he had actually got an advanced liver cancer that was in the stem of the liver, which meant that he couldn't have any treatment, and pretty much you have 3 to 6 months to live.
And that was perhaps November 2017.
Yeah, the time he got to.
He told you, John, in
Yeah.
the way you've described, he phoned you,
Yeah.
Tina, and I think you, Patricia, and
Yeah.
told you essentially what John's just relayed.
Well, I got quite cross with him, and I've never, ever fell out with Seamus. Seamus and me were very close growing up. There's only a year and a few months of difference, albeit he would have drove you crazy most of the time growing up, but he was just so funny, but he had a humour, and he had a dry humour. Sometimes he would have said stuff and you didn't know, is he serious? You know, so he phoned me and he says, you're not going to believe this. I hadn't obviously been chatting to John or anybody, and I says, why, what's wrong? And he says, they've told me, because I knew he was running for the test, I knew there was something going on, and he says, there's nothing they can do. He says, they were hopeful maybe that the tumours were small enough that there could be some treatment, but he says, there's nothing they can do. I have 3 to 6 months to live. And I says, I don't believe you. No way we'll not be accepting that. You know, not at all. That can't be right. You know, can't be that, like, final. You know, because I'll be honest with you, I was thinking, look at all the years that maybe, you know, things, this cancer or that type of cancer doesn't appear overnight, or certainly over a few weeks. It has to gather for years to get to this stage. That was my own feeling on it. And as he told me that, what horrified me more, because at this stage, I was aware that, obviously I was aware with the conversation I had with him that hepatitis can cause cirrhosis and leading on to cancer. And he says to me, you know, he says the doctor was lovely. So he was absolutely delighted with us. It was Dr. McCrory. He says he was very kind. He says, and but he was saying to me, you know, it was probably my lifestyle that caused this. And I went, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Don't you dare let that be said to you. And he says, but he says, like, oh, but he's lovely. I says, I'm sure he's lovely. But I says, this is a direct result of hepatitis C. Don't you dare accept that. And, you know, he fought the corner of the doctor. That is how much respect he had for the medical profession and how my mother and father brought him up.
That was all up.
He wouldn't have questioned that. However, I was adamant that's what it was.
You three know, I think, that there are some medical records that refer to Seamus having an alcohol problem. What's your response to that?
Can I answer that?
Of course you can.
I am telling you now, I am so angry, because that's not Seamus's lifestyle. Don't you get me wrong, Seamus would have done anything to get out of the house, did not rest, did not put his leg up and rest it the way that the other brother would have did it. Seamus could not stay in the house, he had to be out all the time. But if they had have been there and seen Seamus sat at the bar a lot of the times with a cup of tea, just for conversation, to his best friend that worked in the bar, just for somewhere to go and somebody to talk to, because he couldn't do the things that other people wanted to do. Seamus couldn't go down the town to the bars because they were too rough, so these were his 2 local bars, and all his friends went on of it. And that made me angry, because there's a stigma getting put on him, and I don't really like that. And
John, you've made some observations about the times you used to occasionally go out with Shay.
You know, as I say, he didn't play football, but he loved football, and me and him would have went out and watched a game of football and had a couple of pints, yeah. But truth be told, I would say I probably consumed more alcohol than Seamus. He couldn't afford it, to be honest with you.
Right.
And, you know, I just don't know where that came out of. And that's just crazy for them to suggest that.
And there's also some suggestions, again, I know you're aware of this in the medical records, that he, over the years, he missed appointments or didn't attend. And again, whichever one of you wants to answer that, please do.
Can I answer that? Just
Well,
sorry,
both can.
Patricia, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, no doubt about it. It was like you would have needed a crane to get him there.
Yeah,
No doubt about it. I would say aye, he did, and he had loads of appointments from us because he mortally hated hospital. He really, really did.
But what I want to say about...
At one stage, my mother was coming home from the hospital from visiting him, and he was running down Spencer Road in his pyjamas. He was getting there before her. He ran out of the hospital. That was just Seamus's nature.
Well, it was painful. What I was going through in the hospital was painful when he was a child. But if you're chatting more about when he was an adult,
yeah.
I know that Seamus had went to doctors. I mean, I've had comments. I attend clinic for other reasons, with other families members, and we also share the same consultant. And lovely man, very jovial. Everybody, very, very likeable. But there was comments made to me, you know, that boy doesn't turn up, and you know. But Seamus went, in particular, on a few occasions, and I don't want to say criticise, because maybe that's too strong and I'm being unfair, and the last thing I want to be is unfair to anybody. But Seamus would have been criticised for maybe just not attending the clinic, you know. And I don't think anybody would understand, other than maybe the people in this room, haemophilia is so debilitating. Seamus probably was one of the worst haemophiliacs you'll ever meet. He had chronic joints. Getting out of bed. I mean, I'll give you an answer. If he got out of the car to come to your house, you ignored him for a couple of minutes. Well, I'm saying 10 minutes maybe, because he would have stood at the door of the car to adjust it. He would lit on, he was looking for something, and you just ignored that. Then he would have come into your house and he'd have sat in the arm of the chair, could never sit down in the chair. If you said, "Are you sore the day, mucker?" No, I'm grand. It was embarrassing. He was embarrassed by his condition. Now, instead of, maybe the clinics realising that he wasn't coming because he just couldn't come, it was criticised that he was, maybe not taking care of his health. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because Seamus managed his own health, albeit maybe in an amateur way, because, he wasn't medically trained. He had to become that. So, I really have to fight his corner in that sense.
Now, over the months that followed from Shay having been given this diagnosis in about November 2017, Shay's family, yourselves, the wider family, and friends tried to support him and watch out for him.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you've said in your statement, Tina, that Shay was aware that he was dying and he became a little reclusive.
He did. Which is this part's quite funny, because he was so crafty at manipulating who he wanted to get in and who was going to see him. And again, phone calls. We could have had a phone call conversation for an hour and everything was grand, and he sounded grand. Particularly, I think it was about around the 20th of April. And Rosemary had rung me and she says to me, "That boy has the key in the back of the door." So obviously if the key's in the back door, you can't get the key in. She had a key to go in, she would have made him dinner and left stuff over and whatever, and Patricia was the same. But he had the key in the back of the door so that he could decide who was getting in and when. And so for maybe 3 days, we weren't getting in to see him. Now, I had, again, one of his friends who would have messaged, and she was very, very concerned, because he was talking to her in the middle of the night, and he was quite He was terrified, I'll be honest with you. The bravery was there, but he was terrified, and I think night time was very troublesome for him. Anyway, Rosemary did get on, and she says, we would need to contact your GP and maybe get her to come out and take a wee look at you. We'll do it tomorrow. So she says, right, okay, we'll give it to tomorrow. Then she phoned me and she says, this has to stop. He's not, this can't go on. So he had phoned me that particular night, and he says, just a wee conversation. And I says, "How are you feeling?" "I grand." And I said, "Rosie was saying that you just might need a wee bit of the GP out." I'll go tomorrow. And I says, "Right, sure, I'll come up and we'll get it arranged. We'll take you over and we'll get the GP to look you over. Sure, do no harm." As it turned out, it wasn't the next day, because he got us to the following day, which was the Tuesday, and he phoned the GP, or the GP phoned him, and she says, "Seamus, I'm not coming out, because if I come out, I'm putting you straight into hospital. I am sending an ambulance for you now." And unfortunately, the ambulance came and away it went.
You've described again in your statements that in the weeks before he died, he was in pain.
Yeah.
He couldn't find a comfortable way even of lying. He told you that he'd received the dead man's payment.
And the particular day that the comment about his lifestyle, it seemed, he told me it on the same day. It seemed that the same day he was told he had 3 to 6 months to live. It was probably his lifestyle that done it, and he was handed the dead man's payment. And he said, "What do I do with that?"
Before I ask you to talk about the very last part of Shay's life, can you tell us a little more about what he was like?
As a child, I have to tell you, this is the character of him, even from a child. Rosemary, myself, and him would have shared a room when we were children, although he slept really with my mother because he was always ill. But you would have got spurts of Seamus being at himself. We still had to go to school. We had not built them wardrobes that were kind of on the wall of the bedroom, with a sliding door or a push door. Seamus would have went into that wardrobe and hid for maybe 15 minutes we would have went to bed. He would have just been drifting off into a nice sleep, and he would have jumped out of the wardrobe with a sheet over his head, screaming. So it took you about a month then to come round to, and then he would have done it again. So that he was just a night, in that way, he was just a nightmare. He was so funny growing up with. He was just lovely to grow up with. You remember him with the snooker down under the...
Yeah, well, as I say, we pushed him towards snooker because he was quite good, and we didn't want him doing any contact sports, and so I hate snooker, but I agreed to play him because it was what we needed to do to get him, and it was much of a match, and it was usually a humiliation. He used to just destroy me in front of everybody, but you know, as I say, he did love soccer. He loved it so much. Me and both of us were Liverpool supporters, and we always try to go out and watch an odd match there and have a beer, you know. But yeah, it's just that was it. It was
So as regards the snooker,
snooker. He had me tortured. Like as you know, I work for local newspapers, and Seamus was always looking some photograph in or snooker results in, and of course he always left it to the last minute, where you nearly had to stop a press just to get it done for him, and he never changed. And no matter how many times you told him, I need these results earlier, or they, you know, just didn't wash it with him at all. He just
when I was 14, well, he was learning to drive when he was 16, but when I was 14, he obviously couldn't drive, and he said my husband now, he wasn't my husband then, and myself to take him to Oma because he was going to play Jimmy White in Oma. He was, as I say, 14, and he went up and he beat him, and the atmosphere was just amazing. And I know you have a photo of him beating
Got a
him.
photo of Shay as an adult.
Yeah.
It's 2778002. And if we go to the third page, please, Paul. If you keep going. Next one. There's Shay.
That's him. That was 10 days before he died, and he had helped arrange that. Jimmy White was very fond of him, very emotional that night. It was a tough night. My husband and my son and that took him down, and John, myself, and a few days before that, I had said to him, you know, we'll come up, and he'd all his gear on him, and we were laughing about his man. He'd never carried a bag or anything, this bag over him, and he was ready to go for the big night. And he says to me, I says, we'll come up and I'll bring up, you know, we'll put the chair out. And he says, what chair? And I says, well, the wheelchair. I was assuming that he would be going in a wheelchair. I'm not going in a wheelchair. And I says, right, okay, no problem. But the night I came up, or in the afternoon, it says to me, you know, it's actually his friend that owns the bar. And he says, he phoned me and he says, the bouncers are going to take me up the back stairs. And the two of them will get the back wheels and two will get the front. So I know I didn't even lift on it. And I says, that's perfect. And I don't think I've ever seen anything more horrible than to see him being carried up. Such a frail state. And these big burly men in tears. He didn't see them in tears. They were very good at keeping it apart. But that'll stay with me forever. You know, he was taking up the fire escape outside because he didn't want people to see him being wheeled through the restaurant or the bar, whatever was downstairs.
In the last few weeks of his life, there were 3 things he particularly wanted. One was the snooker.
That's right.
One was to be with he had a daughter, to be at his daughter's 16th birthday party. And the other was to go on a family cruise, take his daughter and go on a cruise with all of you.
He did, yes.
He played snooker and he made it to his daughter's
He made it to the
birthday.
snooker that night, albeit he literally just sat there. You know, he wasn't fit to play, but I loved to play Jimmy White again, maybe to see if he could beat him again, you know. The day of his daughter's birthday, he actually wanted to just be alive for the day of his daughter's birthday. And I went over, that was the day he was coming out of the hospital. And I don't know why he didn't want to come out of hospital that day. We never could pick up on why. He wanted to stay to the Monday. or whatever reason. And so for somebody that hated hospitals and, you know, would never have dared be wanting this, he didn't want to come out. And on the way home, and I know it's on my statement, we had ordered balloons and all sorts, and he says, well, I'll go on. He says, maybe I'll just get her another wee present, because he just absolutely idolised her, adored her. And I says, right, sure, we'll do that. And I wheeled him out into the car, got him settled, got down to the shopping centre, and I says, we're going and pick up the balloons now, and there's like a wee jewellery store. And he says, go on, you just go on and get them. He was completely wiped out, and literally he got into the wheelchair from the bed into my car, and he wasn't fit even to go on, obviously. So we got him home, and a couple of photographs with Jennifer and showing, you know, her 16th birthday, and that was it. He was wiped out for the rest of the night. He wasn't fit, but he got to be there at the 16th birthday.
He didn't manage to take her on the cruise.
No,
No.
he doesn't. No, we're doing our best to try and arrange a family cruise.
Talked about helicopters and
we
everything
talked
being
about it,
scanned.
but he just went so far downhill after that that it wasn't
Very
possible.
quickly.
The last few days and weeks of his life you've described in your statements as of your brothers and sisters. So I won't ask you to say anything more about it than you want to, but he was in a lot of pain.
He was
Very much.
horrendous.
Yeah, horrendous.
Horrendous.
Especially I'd say the last 3 or 4 days there where he was totally in his bed, and you know he had a toilet and stuff, and obviously the other brother, being a homophile as well, wasn't fit to do anything like that, so I was doing it because the girls can't do it, and it was just impossible to move him without causing pain, you know.
This day last year, and I can talk about it now, but this morning I probably couldn't have. We can obviously all point out where we exactly were at this minute in time, which was beside his bed. But this particular morning, I went in to the room. What I didn't know, he wouldn't let us stay at night. It was a nightmare. And John had slept on the sofa and wasn't even allowed. Who's out there? You know, he caught you, like. But he needed somebody there night and day. He couldn't have left him. So I came up in the morning with the buns and for the tea. But when I went into the room, there was black bodily fluid on the floor, and he was annoyed. I would be honest, he probably was going in and out of some kind of consciousness. He wouldn't take Oromorph because he wanted to keep his liver, because Dr. McCrory says, don't be taking paracetamol, whatever that doctor had told him, it was gospel. He really did take it on board. So I think he then tried to not take anything, which is, you know, and the pain that he was in was horrendous. And when I went in that morning, and we called Rosemary over and we cleaned up, I cleaned up, she got him sorted and got him under the bed. I actually don't know what I cleaned up, whether it was blood, whether I don't know what it was just liquid. I was a wee bit horrified, and we felt very, very alone, very isolated and not helped in any way from, I would have thought, as hematology and hepatology clinics, I thought maybe, you know, somebody should have been there, some expert help in that sense. Like we would have went to the ends of the earth to help him, as you would do for anybody. But I think a wee bit of extra help or expert help would have absolutely been perfect at that time.
And John, you've described in your statement how the two of you had made plans to watch, I'm sure I'm going to get the name of the football tournament wrong, the European Cup
Champions
finals.
League final last year. I just like to add that what Tina was saying, that on one occasion, and I entered the room to get him a drink, and that fluid was there. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe, but I thought it was something to do with the radiation treatment they got previous, because it didn't look like blood. It's hard to describe what it looked like, but he actually nearly came out of the bed shouting at me not to touch that. Don't you touch that. Whatever you do, do not touch that. You know, and I remember that as well. And then, on the Saturday night we had plans to go across to a pub across the street from where Shimmislav to watch the Champions League final. And we spoke about it most of that week, and then on the Tuesday or Wednesday night he says to me, he says, you know, if you're going to take me across to that match, he says, you're going to have to push me in the wheelchair. How do you feel about that? Ha ha. And I says, I feel okay about that. I says, because I can get drunk and you can push me back. And he says, right, you're on. He says, I will definitely go across in the wheelchair. I says, right. But obviously, you know, he just just went downhill all week. And the Champions League final on that Saturday night for me was sitting at Seamus's bedside with showing it on an iPad. And he was dropping in and out of sleep, you know, and when he heard a cheer coming from actually the pub across the street, believe it or not, he just sat up once and says to me, I take it Liverpool scored, which wasn't the case. But I says, yes, they have. And he just went back down again, and he never spoke to me after that again. That was Saturday night, and Seamus passed away in the early hours of Monday morning.
That was the 28th of May 2018. It's almost a year ago.
Yeah,
Yep.
And how old was Shay?
45.
But he was only 6 weeks, 45.
You mentioned earlier he organised his own funeral. I think it was a Liverpool theme, is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it was all Liverpool themed, yeah.
He bought a Liverpool top and he's
Bought a
told the
Liverpool
Undertaker-
top for the top of his coffin, and he
told
done
the
it all.
Undertaker nobody's getting that. It's going down
Says
along
that,
with me.
yeah. Don't let anybody take it off the coffin, it's to go down along me. Yeah.
All of you described in your statements the devastation that his death brought upon the family.
Yeah.
And the gap that's left in your lives.
Yep.
Is there anything in particular you'd like to say about that?
You know, he was the baby of the house, and I mean, I give him 15 years. I'd be expecting Seamus to be organising my funeral, or no, not the other way about, like. So,
I think it's more the shock of the speed in which, you know, I mean, that's where I'm disappointed with the medical side of things, that they could have afforded us maybe a bit more notice. If not, I'm not saying they could have saved his life.
but,
They could
I
have
think he would have succumbed to the cancer eventually anyway, because by the signs of things, you know, hepatitis is a very serious thing, despite what we thought. If they had just afforded us with scans or picking anything up, even symptoms. Seamus's symptoms were so severe in looking back that we maybe would have had some warning, and maybe that sounds selfish because that's what I would have loved for myself. A bit of preparation for this, you know. And, you know, I have to say, so Seamus says to me 2 weeks before he died, I'm not feared to die. And I says, nor should you be. I says, my mum will be there anyway. You know, she's getting her boy. I says, but you're going nowhere yet. I says, I've been studying this thing. You've 5 years on you. I looked at myself, as if it was crazy, like, but anyway, I get away with that. So, and I says, and, you know, we would have wee conversation. I says, we should maybe, you know what you should do? You should open a snooker skill. And I says, we'll help you run it. You know, just silly chat, anything. And she says, but I says, I want more time, Tina. And I says, I know. I says, you'll get that time. And like, that was literally it wasn't even 2 weeks before he died. And you're sitting there, and my heart was breaking, but you couldn't show the emotion because it wasn't fair enough. The particular morning of the pain must have got horrendously, you know, to cope with for him. I wouldn't accept the driver because, in hindsight, my mother and father both had a driver before they died. So, and it's the most amazing thing because it's a very gentle way of helping you across, if you like. It's the most amazing tool. But he wouldn't accept that. He wouldn't. The hospice nurse came in. She nearly didn't get in because she was in the husband, lovely girl. And he says to her he was looking to go on holidays. And she says, well, we'll not be just going today. And I so thanked her so much because she kept the hope going. As he was gauging, he was asking these questions to see what time have I got. And she says, he kept saying to every doctor, because we could hear from outside, I think there's 2 months in me left yet, you know. And she says, well, you're going nowhere the day. And I thought, thank you. So that encouraged him a wee bit and gave him a wee bit of hope. But the morning of the liquid, and he cried out, and he's never asked for the pain relief in such a way. He says, please give me my Factorate. Yeah. And I says, no problem. And I mixed it up. And I went to inject it, and the needle just obviously his veins collapsed because it just would not go on. And he says, "Is it in there now?" It was like and I says, "It's in there now," but it wasn't. Like there was none. But I wasn't going to do anything anyway. Wouldn't touch it. And he says, "And I'll take some of that Oromore stuff." I says, "No problem. I'll get you that now." And we measured it out now. And but as John said, he was just getting in and out of some kind of coma, I think, which was a blessing. However, you couldn't have passed the bed. And that's the sad thing, because the professionals that were coming in dealing with Seamus were very, very skilled in dealing with cancer pains and tumour pains or whatever they see on a daily basis. They were excellent. They were excellent people. GPs, excellent. But none of them knew about haemophilia pain. And haemophilia pain is horrendous, especially in its rawest form when you have no factor VIII to even try and, resolve bleeds. His legs were that thin, but his ankles were like that. His knees were like that, which they always were. But, I mean, I could see, I'm very aware of haemophilia, so I knew that he had severe bleeds right up and down his body. He hadn't got any bruising, which is not necessarily the best thing, because if it comes up under the bruise, it's not bleeding inside, it's coming to the surface. He just had the most horrendous few days. And then eventually we did get the driver, he agreed to the driver, albeit we had a couple of choice words from him, and he did agree to it, but it took a lot for the driver to just even touch the pain.
And 2 months before Seamus's death, your cousin Michael died.
Mm-hmm. Michael Bertels.
Michael's daughter Laura's given a statement to the inquiry, and she's is content for you to.
She has, yes.
To voice that Michael himself died in his late 50s, I think.
He was 10 days off his 60th birthday, because again, I don't know, it was the haemophilia thing. He had it all planned for a party, and he was having this, and just a gentleman, just a lovely, lovely guy.
And he had haemophilia.
Severe haemophilia.
He was infected with hepatitis C through infected blood products.
Yeah.
And he too died of liver cancer in March 2018.
He did. And Seamus was aware of his death.
So,
I'm just going to ask you, last of all, just a little bit about your eldest brother, Eddie. I'm not going to ask you so much as you know, because we've got Eddie's statement. Eddie also has haemophilia.
Yes,
He also spent a lot of his childhood in hospital. And he also received factor VIII products.
Yes.
And had a similar experience after his diagnosis with hepatitis C on interferon as Shay did.
Yeah.
Now, you've accompanied Eddie to some recent consultations. There was a scan he was due to have in May of last year that didn't happen. Can you recall what happened?
I had asked, obviously when Seamus was diagnosed, quite shockingly, and what seemingly to us was it was totally out of the blue for us, but anyway, after that I expected, knowing that Eddie had hepatitis C, that certainly the doctors would be knocking down the door to get Eddie in and give him a check over, after Michael and then Seamus. So we expected that. So on a few occasions when I would have been, in contact with the doctor, I would have said, could you make sure that Eddie's getting referred for a scan, thinking that would happen very easily. That wasn't the case. By the time we got to May, when he eventually did get an appointment, and I had asked on 2 occasions at that stage, but he did get the scan appointment out, 22nd of May. Hence, Seamus was extremely ill at that stage. But there's enough of us that I was going to take Eddie. Eddie, he trusts, he relies very heavily on ourselves. So he had asked me to take him, and I said, of course I'll take you up. And Seamus was very, very ill at that time. And 2 days before the scan was due, he got a phone call from hepatology in Belfast to say that the scanner was broke and they would send him out a new appointment. My initial thought, that was because I think They were very aware, everybody was very aware of Seamus's imminent death. And I thought, well, that was nice of them because, you know, we can take Eddie up maybe in a few weeks. I don't think a few weeks would have mattered. That wasn't the case, quite frankly. I do believe that they used Seamus's death as a timing tool, and that's the only way I can say it, to avoid giving Eddie the scan. And the reason I say that is as the year simmered on, we got to September. And again, I had asked, you know, because the scan didn't follow on, and I assumed it would. And I'd asked Dr. Benson, would you refer Eddie for the scan, because they haven't sent out a new one. The scanner was broken. He did look a bit confused, to be fair. He did think, was the scanner broken? I gave him this information and he seemed surprised. So whether he thought Eddie had the scan, I don't know. So we went, at that stage, I thought, well, we'll give it 2 weeks. The 2 weeks had passed, still no scan. And Eddie was, at this stage, was anxious, as you would be yourself, putting very high reliance on the scan, being, keeping him safe. He says to me, I haven't had any word about that scan. And I says, well, look, I'll send an email. And I sent an email. I sent the email to pretty much, I would say, maybe 10 people. Hepatology. I sent it to hematology. I sent it to social workers. I sent it to the head of the trust. Could you give my brother a scan? Because at this stage, I was kind of thinking, this isn't an accidental forgetting about him. I felt it was a deliberate avoidance to bring him in. Now, we had just such a horrible year that, I was thinking maybe our grief's turning into anger, but it certainly was for me. So the email, from the email, I got one phone call back, and it was a lovely nurse by all accounts, and she just says, your brother was taken off the list or struck off, whatever it was. And I says, why would you do that? I says, he's got hepatitis. What would be the reason for that? And she says, well, our policy is if you don't turn up for a scan, I think it was 2 consecutive scans. I am not aware of any other appointment ever sent to Eddie, but apparently they said that there was one previous year around Seamus's diagnosis. Eddie's not aware of it. My aunt, who at that time would have been in Eddie's care as well, wasn't aware of it. So anyway, we've left it that this invisible scan appointment nobody knows about. So this nurse went on to say that he was taken off the list because he didn't turn up for his scans. And I went, right, okay, and could you give me the dates of them? I said, because I find that shocking because he's desperate for this scan. She said the date of the year before. And I says, well, look, I'm not aware, so I can't comment on that. I don't know. And I says, have you any other dates? And she says, yes, the 22nd of May. And I says, absolutely not. And the reason being is Eddie writes everything down. He documents everything. And as soon as that call came to him, he rung me. And I sat at the doorstep of my house because we had just left Seamus. And he says, the scanner's broke. I don't have to go for the appointment. And I says, okay. Obviously, we thought the appointment was coming out. I said, so I know that appointment was cancelled. What I didn't realise when Eddie was reading it out, he was reading it off his handwriting, and she asked me on the phone, did I have a letter to the effect? And I says, I'm sure he has, because he's just read it. He read it to me, but he didn't. It was my mistake. He had read it off his notes. However, I went back into my O2 account, and I found the timing of my phone call from Eddie's phone, and then we went into Eddie's O2 account and we found the call that came from Belfast. So the call did come in. She wasn't aware of it. I'm not saying she was trying to say that it didn't happen, but she was saying it didn't happen, but she wasn't aware of it. So I says, well, going forward, what are we doing? We need to get him scanned, because my concern was that we weren't going to lose another brother to the horrific death that we had just lost Seamus. So the scan did happen.
And that was the end of November?
That was right about the end of November, yeah. 28th of November, actually, I think it was.
And you went along with Eddie?
I did, I drove him up, yeah.
And what you've said in your statement is that you recall being told 2 different things about Eddie's liver by two different doctors.
I did.
What was that? So what was the first thing that you were told?
So in the morning he had 2 different appointments, is the way it was presented. He had an appointment for an ultrasound scan in the morning, and then he was going to have a consultation that would have explained what went on. So we went in the morning to the ultrasound, and then we came downstairs into the hepatology clinic for the consultation. Now, the scan, Eddie went in and he came out. He's quite jovial as well. And he says, I have gallstones. He said, I never knew that. Just, And I says, well, there you are then. That's grand, if they're not doing you any harm. So we went downstairs and we walked into the hepatology clinic, and we met a doctor called Dr. Cash. And he just says, it's nice to meet you, Eddie. I've never met you before, which I found incredible, quite frankly, because I thought I wouldn't have been aware. I knew Seamus had never been, involved with the liver side of things for all those years, but I did think maybe Eddie might have been. I wasn't aware, but he hadn't met Eddie, and Eddie had just says, you've had a scan there. Have you ever had a scan before? There was just a conversation. He says, no, I've never had a scan, and then they talked about other things, that.
And what you've said in your statement, and obviously, as I said at the outset, we don't yet know what the doctors or the trust might say, but what you recalled the consultant, Dr. Cash, saying was that all was looking good with Eddie's liver,
Yeah.
and you accepted that, and you were
Yeah, we were very
pleased
happy
with
with that, yeah, because, yeah.
But then you then saw another doctor, Dr. McDougall.
Mm-hmm.
And what did Dr. McDougall say to you, as far as you recall?
Well, as we were leaving Dr. Cash, I had asked for a copy of the scan, just because we had already applied for Eddie's notes as a process for the inquiry and stuff, and we didn't want to leave anything outstanding, so we had asked for a copy of the scan, which he gave us, and as we were walking out, he just says, well, Eddie's going down for some bloods. Eddie, I'll probably do another wee scan when you're down there, which, fine. We went downstairs, Eddie went in, and about 10 minutes later, the nurse came out and she says, Ms. McLaughlin, could you come in? Dr. McDougall's in explaining stuff to your brother. I'm not sure what I'm allowed. Is it okay to say exactly what happened? Yep. Okay. So I went in, and as I went to sit down in the chair, Dr. McDougall just announced that he was explaining to Eddie that there was advanced cirrhosis of the liver, which nearly knocked me off my feet, I'll be honest with you, because I actually says to him, what do you mean? Sure, we're just literally upstairs told that the liver was fine. How could this be now what we're being told? So he went, but it's okay because we have a great treatment, and I know there is a great treatment, and that's the sad thing about it, for hepatitis. And I says, but cirrhosis of the liver, as far as my knowledge is not curable. And he says, no, you're right, but this treatment will slow down any effect of the hepatitis attack in the liver. There was a couple of mentions of alcohol as well, which I immediately, Eddie hadn't touched alcohol in over 10 years, so, it had to be the hepatitis that was attacking the liver, which was very concerning to us. As we were sitting, because Dr. Cash had previously mentioned this brilliant treatment, which we were, and I had asked him why Seamus wouldn't have got this treatment. He didn't clarify that for me, but Dr. McDougall did clarify, so they must have had a conversation in between. And his words to me were, with your brothers, referring to Seamus, larger tumours, this treatment wouldn't have been appropriate, or it wouldn't have been any good to him. And I immediately turned from me to Eddie, and he says, but Eddie, with the smaller tumours, it would. I thought I was going to explode. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't react because I was very aware of Eddie. I didn't want to alert him, but my understanding that cirrhosis of the liver is not tumours. Tumours are, to me, another more serious stage of liver issues. The conversation just went on. Eddie had spoke to Dr. McDougall about what was going to happen next. He was going to have some bloods, and then we were going home. But when we left the clinic, I picked up my daughter. She's at Queen's, so we made a day out of it. Eddie was up with us. It was around Christmas, so we thought we'll go for a tea. And so when my daughter got into the car, Eddie says, I was at the clinic, and Carla says, "Aye, and how did you get on? Did you get on okay?" He says, I was just told there was a wee bit of cancer there. Well, I'm almost crashed the car. Well, I didn't. To be fair, I kind of thought he had misinterpreted cirrhosis, or and maybe picked up on tumours. And I says, "No, Mucker, it's not cancer. Cirrhosis is bad, but it'll be monitored and looked after, and it can turn to cancer. But no, it's not cancer." And he went, "No," he says, "before you came into the room." No, he says, "No," he says, "I have a wee bit of cancerous cells, but not to worry about it." And I says, "But who told you that?" And he says, he couldn't remember his name, and I says, "Dr. McDougall," and he says, "Yes." And I says, "But," he says, "No, but that's why I sent out for you." He says, "I heard cancer," and I nearly fell off the chair.
And what you've said in your statement is there was going to be a further scan. Eddie was told he was going to be scanned in May, which would be this month.
Yeah, which was really well. I actually was a wee bit cross with Dr. McDougall, I'll be honest with you, because he said he would send Eddie for a scan in 6 months. I mean, we were very aware my understanding is what Simon said yesterday, how he's treated now. It's still a very difficult condition to monitor and look after, and as we heard from Simon. But Simon's scans every 6 months to me seems like a normal way to deal with this. Maybe even 3 monthly scans, because I know some people in England would at certain stages get 3 monthly scans. So whenever he says he would give Eddie a scan every in 6 months' time, and we'll do it at Alton Galvin for his convenience, and I says that's not necessary, because Eddie enjoyed the day out, and we would have made a day of it. And I says, "I'll bring Eddie to Belfast, it's not a problem." But he was adamant, that it would be the end of May and not before, and I couldn't understand that.
And what you've said in your statement, and what Eddie has echoed in his, is we're now left in limbo, waiting to hear about Eddie and worrying whether he awaits the same fate as Shay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think Eddie's have no doubt that he feels that he is. This is something that's very much in front of him. Hopefully, years down the line, but it definitely needs monitored.
I've no further questions for you, but do you have anything that any of you would like to add?
No.
Yeah, it's gone blank.
No.
So I'm
Well,
just,
if I could just say, this is a platform, and thank you so much for bringing it here. This is a platform that really shouldn't go on being maybe used in a very positive way. I know there's been talk about maybe myself and others criticising doctors. I am not saying that any of those doctors are incompetent, because I believe they are very excellent doctors. I just feel that maybe they're not using their excellence in a way that is positive, certainly for our family and our experience. And I would please urge them that if there's anybody out there that they believe could be of any risk at all, please bring them in, scan them, blood test them, anything that has to be done, because this was a frightful experience. Actually, and I did speak to you about what has gone on with myself recently, which has left me a bit fearful.
you have your own investigations, you have family members who have ongoing treatment requirements, and you're left, you were explaining, and you say it in your statement, with a mistrust in the medical profession. Total
Mistrust. I had, after Seamus died, I felt I'm not normally a stressful person. In fact, I'm always, everybody would say I would be a bit hyper. But after Seamus died, I took very severe, chronic fatigue, just exhaustion, and I couldn't explain it. I had other symptoms. I went to GP, which is not something I have to go to often. And as it panned out, I was sent to ENT for investigations, thinking that I had vertigo, which was horrendous, throwing up. It was just a horrendous experience. And because of that, I ended up in the ENT clinic. The doctor there, what I didn't realise, was very concerned that the symptoms I was showing was a brain tumour. He had red flagged me to an MRI scan. Now, hence the difficulty of getting Eddie from November, 2017 to getting the scan pretty much a year later. The fear that went through my body that the scan was going to be quick, and it was quick. It was about 3 days later. Thankfully, it's not a brain tumour, but unfortunately, the symptoms also are very in line with hepatitis C. And the only way that I could have contracted hepatitis C, because I am not a sex worker, I've never had factor VIII blood, I have been married for 25 years, I have never taken drugs. So the only way I could have contracted, if it is, and I'm going now next week for more investigations, and I have sent off a secret test, which is shocking that I even have to do this, but this is the only way I can feel confident that maybe I'm getting a proper result, is I had to send for a kit online. I will go through the GP as well, but I've had to send a kit offline on an alias and an anonymous address, just in the hope that if it is, that it's identified. I have, as I've spoke to you, dealt with my brother, which I would do 1,000 times over. But not only did they not warn Seamus of symptoms and things to look out for, even when Seamus took the cancer, they didn't say to the family members, be careful. And I'm mopping up bodily fluids and I don't know what I've touched. I don't know how I should have been protecting myself there. I didn't wear gloves. I had Dettol and I had wipes, and so that's what's left me. So I have maybe bordering on a paranoia. I have no trust left, and I would love that restored.
I'm just going to ask Mr. Snowden, who, as you know, represents you and the family, if there's anything further.
Thank you.
There isn't.
Thank you very much.
Can I thank each of you, Tina and John and Patricia, for telling us about your brothers and your cousin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's where we finish today, I think. Tomorrow, Miss Richards?
Tomorrow we have 3 witnesses, Sharon Lowry, Mark Donnelly and Caroline Carberry.
And we start at 10:30.
I'm not sure, sir. 10.
We start at 10. 10 o'clock then, tomorrow.